Good Tuesday to you, everybody. Incom 651. Welcome to week boom 3. How you doing? Everybody hanging in there? Oh, look at that. That is a disgustingly dirty cup. It's just messy, I suppose. Nothing special on it today except for stains. Okay, welcome to another week. Communication 651, public relations. Hope you passed a restful weekend. This week, and for this video, per usual, we're going to talk a little bit about the work that's coming up, and then we'll review your questions from last week, see if we can't, illuminate any of the answers, give you some confirmation about what you're doing, because remember, the final exam will be drawn from these discussion questions. Okay, so looking ahead to this week, and just by the by, I had somebody last week email me and say, hey, can I get all the questions? I want to start cracking away at them, and I understand that you want to get going on the questions, even on a Monday or a Tuesday. There's a method to my madness. Okay, sometimes I will not post the questions until Wednesday, Thursday. And the reason for that is that the volume of reading may be much larger than, 3 or 4 questions can really represent. And I want you to read the readings. I don't want you to read to the questions. Now you might be saying, hey, I'm a busy student. I understand all that. Let's not lose the forest for the trees. All right. Our purpose of being here is to not simply read the material and then answer a question. I mean, we're not parrots. We're not being taught some sort of an autonomic response. You want to develop as a thinker, which starts with broadening the depth and breadth of your knowledge. What do you know? All right. And as the what do you know goes up, your ability to make connections and deeper analyses and see beyond what's happening right now, especially if you're thinking about working in this business, that will make you valuable to your clients. All right. So there's a purpose in what I'm doing. All right. Okay. So for this week, we're going to turn our attention to questions. They're two separate topics, but they do go hand in hand. We're going to turn our attention to ethics, and then we're going to turn our attention to the structure of a plan. Now, last week I asked you a question. I quoted from Scott. Some of her thoughts on ethics, and we're going to get to that here. But as you construct a PR plan, and as you're constructing a plan to convince your client, in this case, Backcountry, of the need for research, this is your first PR assignment, presentation, okay? I'm hoping that the readings in Scott, she lays out this sort of formulaic table as to how to put together a plan, will help you. But how ethical your work ultimately is and what you're doing starts with how ethical your plan is. So as you read the stuff in Stacks and the stuff in Scott, and then I've got something for you to watch. I'll talk about that here in just a second. These do go together, because as you're putting together a plan, think about the ethos, the ethics of what you're doing. Okay, so in terms of material, that's what that's sort of an overview. In addition to the readings, all right, and you'll find this in the module under study. You'll read chapter 3 in Stack and chapter 5 in Scott, and then there's a shortish video. It's about an hour that I want you to watch. Okay, it's part of a BBC series called The Century of the Self. It's part one. If I think you're going to find it very intriguing because it's condensed because it's only an hour, but it is essentially the beginning of public relations. Where did this field come from? Now, people in charge or whether that's small or large, like an entire area or just a household, have used means and methods to try to, persuade others that they ought to be doing this or that the reputation is this and not this. Okay, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the birth of public relations as a science, as something that's studied, quantified, tested, applied, the results tested and reapplied, and so on and so forth. And the origins of PR, if you don't know anything about it, might surprise you. So I want you to watch this Century of Self. Again, it runs 50 something minutes, but I think you'll find it engaging. And there's a key player in there, a man by the name of Edward Bernays, who on the American side of things is considered the founder of public relations. So if you have any problems with the link, because it links over to YouTube, quick send me a message. Don't leave that to like, Sunday. Okay, because I've got questions for you. And then also, if you haven't, you really need to be on top of and getting out front of your first PR presentation. All right. So the link is in the module. It's in the assignment section. It really now I want I had a chance to talk with one of you during my office hours last week, and there were some things that came up that I think could be really illuminating as to what you are and are not doing in this first assignment. Number one, you are not creating the public relations plan for this company, but you are, number two, creating a plan to convince this company why they should be using more research to craft their public relations plan as a precursor to their advertising. All right. And then number three, keep in mind that the document that you're producing is an in-house document. It's not going to be seen by the client. So you can be as blunt in your assessment as to what the client has done and has not done in relationship to the benefits or lack of benefits of research. Okay. So again, I want you to take this assignment, seriously. I want you to dig into it, read up about the client. And you might be saying, hey, the client here is Real Company, Backcountry. You might be saying, I don't know anything about backcountry. I don't know anything about outdoors. I don't go outdoors a lot. I'm not in the out, and I dislike the terminology that gets thrown around for this sort of thing, outdoor community, outdoor space, which is redundant. Okay. But we need labels. So there you go. So you might be saying, this is just not my space. No pun intended. That's beside the point. They're coming to you as a client, and your job in this case is to figure out a presentation that will convince them of the benefits of research. So remember what you are and aren't doing. You are not crafting a full-blown PR plan. You are crafting a plan that will convince them why they need research. Okay, so in effect, your first, and this is I can tell you from working in the business for many years, your first necessary success of any public relations campaign is necessarily persuading the client that a particular campaign is necessary. Because if you can't do that, you don't get to do the full-blown campaign. I mean, you might, but you're not getting paid, and what's the point? Okay. All right. So make sure that you're on top of that because it's due next week. It's due February 10th. And what's today? The 28th. All right. Okay. So take a look at that. That's this week. Let's take a look at last week, your questions. Oh, and by the way, you'll notice that there are 4 questions instead of 3 questions for this week's discussion. Now, I've divvied up the points and the number of questions to work out that, 15 weeks with 3 questions, 4 points apiece, that gives you the total number of points slotted for the questions. I mean, if you look on the syllabus, every now and because nobody's going to get all 100% of all the points for all exercises. Okay. So every now and again, I'll drop in a few additional questions that is more than the standard 3. So in this case, week 3, you have 4 questions instead of 3. And that's a way for you to develop a little cushion. Okay. I mean, per the syllabus, there's 180 points possible for the discussion. Throughout the course of the semester, with me dropping in these extra questions, that number will come up somewhere between 190 and 200. So if you stay on top of discussion questions, maybe you get a chance at some extra points. Okay, now let's take a look at the questions from last week. All right. Question number 1. What do your authors mean when they write that PR is at its heart management of credibility? Now you're going to notice, if you haven't already, there's a real difference between how Stacks and Scott go about discussing and laying out PR. I mean, just fundamentally, and we'll get to that in the third question. But here, this is Stacks, management of credibility. John, you went last. Let's take you first. According to Stacks, PR professionals are primarily responsible for managing relationships with all the stakeholders while balancing out organizations' public image and reputation. Excuse me. In a situation with so many participants involved, credibility is key to trustworthy relationships inside the organization, inside and outside. Moreover, while creating a public image of a brand or company, the public relations professional acts like the representative of the company, affecting public opinion and trust to the brand. Thus, PR can truly be seen as management of credibility at all levels. Excellent answer. This is my opinion, and I believe it to be true. I have someone that's worked in public relations for many, many years. One of the things that I think companies, they painted themselves into a corner by way of public relations, that is, they sort of put themselves in an impossible situation. That there was this trend. I'm seeing a sort of drop over the last 5 or so years, but prior to that, it was full on, this trend in which companies were presenting themselves through their public relations and through their advertising. They were really driving at the relationship aspect with their customers. That we're family. You actually hear that sort of words, those sorts of words. Your family. We take care of you. Whether that's an insurance company or you're in good hands. Or just a large store like Target. Okay. No, clients are not family. You're not caring for them in the same way that siblings and parents and aunts and uncles and relations do for each other. I understand the motivation. What they're trying to do is develop that bond of trust, of credibility between themselves and their customers. However, customers show a remarkable tolerance for the expectation of the company just doing what the company does. Again, we're seeing this in the market. Starbucks is an excellent example. They have moved way over into the social justice space, in which they were encouraged. They got so far off into that space. They were encouraging their baristas to start conversations about race with people who were in line getting coffee, which, I remember when that campaign came out. It's got to be about 5 years back. I was just rubbing my head going, yeah, that's what a consumer standing in a long coffee line is going to want, not only for themselves, but, they're watching 2 or 3 people ahead when somebody, who makes coffee starts a discussion about race. Hey, I got an idea. How about just give me my coffee? Okay. Yo, Starbucks, mind your own business. You just do the coffee, and then you'll let others whose business it is to study sociology and these complicated social questions do that. They don't do coffee. They do sociology and policy. You, as a coffee company, you do the coffee. you're seeing a movement back in that direction because in trying to build what I would call hyper credibility with their clients, they've stretched the bounds of credulity. There's what people are going to believe. And it's like companies, whether it's stores or products, rolling out things for Pride Week, and then they immediately roll them. They dump them. It's like, well, okay, so what you care about is increasing sales or using this event to push products, but you're not really concerned because, I mean, frankly, as a company, that's not what you do. All right, so if you find yourself in that situation and you have clients saying, "Oh, well, why don't we say they're our family or we really care about their values?" And unless the business is in that business, I encourage you to find a way to talk them out of it. I mean, Chick-fil-A makes chicken. If you ever go to work for, a Chick-fil-A campaign and they want to start making hamburgers, talk them out of it because Chick-fil-A doesn't make hamburgers. They make chicken. Okay. Do you see what I'm saying? So excellent answer, John. Management of credibility is key. And, one of the ways to fall afoul, to go awry, to damage credibility is to start to say that you are things that you're not, even when you intend to do well. Okay. One of the greatest risks to credibility for an organization is to overpromise and underdeliver. And people will be very critical. They will be as critical of that as they would be of deception, because in their mind, it is deception. Okay. All right. Next question. Question number 2. Please explain and discuss what your author meant. And I'm sometimes I'll give you the author's name, sometimes not, because I want you reading the material, not just reading the question. When they ask, can public relations outcomes that are non-financial actually influence financial outcomes? How did they answer this question? That is, did they answer the affirmative, the negative, is unknown, etc.? Okay. This is this is crucial, this question, because when you're crafting a campaign, all right, this is business. The bottom line is the bottom line. That is how things add up with support or not for the client. Okay. So can things that are non-financial include financial outcomes? This is almost kind of like a duh question, but Hillary, let's see what you say. In the study by Lee and Stacks, cited in Stacks 2017, 5 non-financial variables are listed and hypothesized to be correlated with ROE and ROI. And by the way, I'm expecting you to know what those abbreviations mean, or acronyms, I guess. Okay. These 5 non-financial variables mentioned include credibility, confidence, trust, relationship, and reputation. Within the study, Lee and Stacks analyzed 472 of the top Fortune 500 companies from 2009 to 2013. I would like to see how the data would look at present day, given the Instagram is missing from the study, with social media platforms included, being Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google Plus, et cetera. So given the data of that time frame, stock return was found to be most highly associated with Facebook. The only non-financial variable from Lee and Stack study that was not found to have an impact was confidence. Thus, the hypothesis that non-financial variables do impact financial outcomes for business does appear to have face validity. Okay, good answer, Hillary. Could be a little tighter, but yes, the hypothesis is supported. Okay, so what does this mean for you if you're doing PR work? Well, what it means is one of the first places to look, and I'm going to recommend a book to you here right now, when you're dealing with a client and their public relations, especially if you're dealing in the commercial sector. Now, you may pick up jobs elsewhere in other sectors, But let's, this is where the bulk of the jobs are to be found. Okay. Prior to the evaluation of exchange, that is, that someone gets a product or a service from the company and they go, oh yeah, okay, this was a value for the money, or yeah, no, I don't think so. Is what is it that people are thinking? What are they expecting concerning that company? And I want to recommend a book to you right now. Here we go. In fact, I'll recommend two of these because they're excuse me, stretching up onto my shelf. Okay. The author, and speaking Italian, I use the Italian pronunciation, is Cialdini. Cialdini. He's American. That's probably not how he says his name. Okay. If you're interested in public relations, and whether it's in a business or non-business sector, doesn't matter. This, and I'm going to show you another one, a companion, is an essential book. You could get this cheap off of Amazon. You should buy this and read it studiously. Okay. It's called Influence. That is, it's how do you persuade people to do things? All right. And the companion book that he wrote after he wrote this is a book called Pre-Suasion. A little play on persuasion. Okay. Pre-Suasion. Okay. And in these two books, what you're going to find are research tested methods to move people's opinions prior to an encounter with the product or the process. Now, if the product or the process doesn't live up to the opinion that's formulated prior to, well, you have a problem. Now you're back to the credibility issue. So you make sure that the one follows the other. But here is something to bear in mind. Okay. Humans have patterns of behavior, and you could, I'm painting here with a big brush, but you can divide those patterns into roughly two categories. Patterns of behavior that are distinct to individual behavior, and patterns of behavior that are distinct to group behavior. Yes, I'm sorry, Virginia, there's no Santa Claus, and we act differently when we're acting alone or when we're in a group. It's not like day and night, but there are distinct patterns of behavior in between the two. I don't know what the right word would be. Phases. Modality. Don't like that word either because it just sounds like gibberish. It's tossed around a lot. Okay. Cialdini is looking at he explores the science of behavior in groups primarily. All right. Which is where you're going to encounter most people in your work if you're in public relations. Okay. Take a look at those books, and you'll see that one of the things that Cialdini emphasizes is developing that pre-relationship, which is then the expectation that's developed in that pre-relationship is fulfilled in the actual relationship is key to solid public relations. Okay, question number 3. Consider the following quote from Scott, not Stock. Big difference here. Ethics are interpreted loosely, and because each person has their own set of ethics, it is challenging to find the common ground when people approach the conversation from a broad approach. It's not even a well-worded sentence. I'm being very critical already. I suggest the best way to approach a rational, productive discussion on setting your own code of ethics for the project is to begin with the very basic elements that impact most communication projects, such as the use of imagery, use of shared information, historic documentation, attribution and credit, and more. Okay. So what are we to make of this? First of all, do you understand what she's getting at here? Okay. Maybe you read that and you scratched your head and you're like, I'm not following. Okay. What she's getting at here is, well, because ethics what's considered allowed is so variable out there. Wah! Who knows what is right and what is wrong? I suggest that you just sit down and say, what kind of images can we use? What kind of information? What kind of historical references? What can we attribute like this to that? And that becomes our ethical standard. That's what she's saying. Okay. Now, as Christians at a Christian university, looking, to set out on our journey, thinking sacramentally, acting sacramentally, and transforming the world. What are we to make of this? Lacey, you went last here. Let's take you for this one. Unfortunately, Lacey writes, this type of thinking is part of our secular postmodern culture, a culture where feelings and the self are considered most important basis for living life. As Christians, we understand that life is a gift and reality comes from God alone. Okay, right there, that's exactly, I'm going to pause right there because that's exactly the contrast that I wanted you to draw. That there is such a thing as objective reality. Now, there can be productive and open, interesting discussions about how the perception of that reality varies from group to group and individual to individual. That's fine. But let's not get confused. And man, over the past 15 or so years, have we gotten confused collectively as a society? And that is that we have substituted the question of perception for actual. And there's this sort of merging. It's almost like a stellar parallax. Well, one is behind the other, and it becomes even brighter than the both. And this notion that perception is reality. If I believe it, if I perceive it to be so, then I am. No, you're not. Okay, look, but how we treat different perceptions, how we sift through, well, is this different perception really mission critical to our function as a society? Okay, is this behavioral variation really a threat to what we're doing? I'm going to give you an example here that I don't mean to push buttons. All right, but this is an outstanding example. For a long, long time, and it was a state provision, state legality. Okay, that states had laws against sexual practices that deviated from the norm. Okay, and sexual practices that deviate from the norm, and the norm being bonding of male and female and procreation as the creation of children, are collectively referred to as sodomy laws. Now, some people think that sodomy is specific to a certain type of activity. That's not true, okay? But rather a sexual act in which there's no chance for procreation. Okay. However, in a case in Texas, Lawrence versus Texas, in 2003, the High Court, the Supreme Court of Texas, struck down the sodomy laws. That is saying you can't criminalize non-procreative behavior. And the reason that they did, all right, now the challenge to the law was brought by those representing homosexual couples, and their challenge to the law was, well, as couples were persecuted under the law, we're treated as lesser citizens. We risk jail, which was all true under these laws in Texas. The heart of this law, they argued, was that non-procreative intimate relations are illegal. Why, they asked, isn't the state penalizing and criminalizing intimate relations that are guided, that involve contraception, in which there's no chance for procreation. In fact, recreational intimate relation, I mean sex. I don't want YouTube to take my video down. Recreational intimate relations, there's no chance for procreation by design. Why aren't those participants and activities criminalized as well? And the state of Texas went, yeah, you have a good point. That this is not a fair application of the law. Okay, so what does this have to do with the difference between perception and reality, and why we should be very careful about that? Well, because at the heart of this monumental change, okay, that opened the door for things like gay marriage was the perception that one non-procreative activity was okay, but the other was not. So the question becomes, as Christians, do we have set markers of reality, or no? Or do they just fluctuate situation by situation? Now, I'm not picking on anybody, or I'm not pointing at anybody, but this is one of the real glaring instances in which Christians missed this point. And they're like, whoa, what happened? How did these laws get overturned? Well, I mean, here's what you missed. Okay. I mean, and as a Christian, I'll take the position concerning same-sex relations as we ought not to do that. All right. That's part of it. And there's some reasons behind that. That's part of a Christian ethos. Okay. However, we ought not to do something because of a core principle, not because of participants. So you have to be very careful with this sort of fluctuating, mode of assigning ethics, because it's not just, as you point out, Lacey, it's not just secular postmodernists, that is, those who are non-religious. Postmodern thinking has crept into the church as well. And it's all over the place. Okay, so back to you. The Bible tells us that right and wrongs are written in our hearts, and although sin can certainly conceal and warp our interpretations of those realities, as Christians, we are called to be truthful in a loving way. Okay, that's, and concerning the issue of these laws and treatment of people that are in same-sex relations. Now, I'm off topic here, I realize this, but I think this is one of the places where the church erred. Okay, and that is the right word and the right pronunciation. Erred is saying, okay, and this goes for any sin. We ought not to do that. This is why. All right, but, and here's the tough part: we love the sinner, and that starts with ourselves. But we don't love the sin. We say, okay, you as a person, again, starting with ourselves, we are unique creations of God. We love ourselves. We love you, but we have a behavioral standard that we're all striving for. If we're going to fall short of the glory of God, as Paul wrote, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Okay, but we're going to get up, dust ourselves off, and again, as St. Paul wrote, continue to work out our salvation with fear and trembling. Okay. As Christians, we are called to be truthful in a loving way regarding communication ethics, including shared information, historical documentation, et cetera, et cetera. Some situations have a clear answer for the right thing to do. Unfortunately, with the new realm of rapidly growing technology and AI, right and wrong is not always immediately clear. These areas can take some time to think through and understand where ethical limitations should be. I think that as Christians, we are called to know our Bibles and understand the fields that we're working in and how Bible teaching plays into that field. That will require a lot of extra time reading, studying, but I think it's a responsibility that we have as Christians. Absolutely. Excellent answer, Lacey. That's exactly what I'm wanting you to get at. Now, I believe that I mentioned this last week, but if I didn't, I'm going to mention it again. There's a book that you should have a look at, and it's called The Search. Okay, and it's by an author named Bartel. Um, and it is about it's an interview, a series of interviews with the founders of Google, and what the Google revolution, the search engine revolution. I mean, there were a lot of them in the early days, but Google sort of squished them all out. Okay. I mean, the full title of the book is called The Search: How Google and Its Rivals Rewrote the Rules of Business and Transformed Our Culture. And the author is John Battelle, Battelle, John Battelle, The Search. Okay. What you're going to find in this book is at the heart of the model that gets built into the operation of Google, or any search engine for that matter, but again, Google just so dominates things now, is the idea that it's the idea of utilitarianism, of collectivism, and that is what the majority of people say is right is the right answer to the question. Well, kind of. Now, an approach like that can be useful if you're dealing with certain types of information. So if you ask collectively, what's 2 plus 2? And the collective answer, the answer that's responded that you get most by way of response is 4. Okay, so when you're looking at quantified, objective, well-established category, that's fine. Okay, but what the collective answer is to a particular question is highly contextual, and it's highly cultural. So, for example, Google was launched. They had their sort of first early iterations in 1996. Okay, but what if they had launched in 1906? All right, instead of 1996. Okay. And you had typed in the question again. I'm going to push on some hot buttons here. You had typed in the question, are African Americans people? Boop. What sort of answer would you have gotten? Well, considering that at the turn of the century, 1902 to 1904, somebody check me on those dates, the Bronx Zoo in New York City actually kept a man from the Congo in a cage on display for people to come and look at. May have influenced the answer. And his name was Oda Benga. And his story is well documented. That's another fascinating story to read. And what's most fascinating about the story is if you read, there was an op-ed written in the New York Times when people were like, yeah, I'm not real comfortable with keeping a guy, even if he is from Congo, and he was rather short stature, classified as a pygmy, keeping him in a cage. They first put him in with the orangutans, hey, because why not? And then he fashioned some weapons out of the wood in there and killed them because they're orangutans. I mean, they're great apes. People and great apes don't live side by side. And then they're like, oh, hey, all right, well, he seems all right. And they let him wander about the zoo. And, he was there with visitors would come like, oh, how exotic. And people, some people felt a little uncomfortable about this, as rightly they should. But there was an editorial written in the New York Times in which the paper said, oh, come on. Look at him. He's happier here than he's ever, certainly happier living in a zoo than he could be living over in Congo and Africa. I mean, Lord knows what goes on over there. So we need to be very, if you're not getting the sarcasm, they're completely off of their heads by putting somebody in a cage. Okay. And then saying, oh, yeah, he's much better off. I mean, that sounds like an argument that we heard around certain states in the South about 1860 something. You have to be very careful with this idea that the collective answer is the answer. No, it's not. Because sometimes the collective gets it very, very wrong. And that's where, as Christians, you got to step in and do the hard work, as Lacey is pointing out. You have to be informed, and you have to fight the good fight. And sometimes you're gonna, even as a pioneer, when you get out front on an issue, you're gonna soak up slings and arrows. I can tell you, in public relations and in working in communication, I have left or lost jobs because of ethical issues, because it was just like, no, we're not going to do this. This is wrong. And I'm not going to participate. And I don't mean, it was something hideously, perfidiously wrong. Like we were going to say, grind up dead bodies and pass them off as something to eat. I mean, okay, where that weird example. I'm thinking of the film Soylent Green, with Charlton Heston. Okay, I'm not talking about that, but there were things from a Christian perspective, disrepresentations that I just, no. And I moved on. Okay, the upside to work in communication and public relations is there's a lot of work. I mean, there's a lot of work to be had out there. The downside is, the reason that there's a lot of work is there's a lot of turmoil in that market space. So, you have to decide. You have to come into an organization with your ethics. This is what I'll do. This is what I won't do, well intact. Because unfortunately, and I'm not picking on her, it's a good book, and that's why I picked it. But Scott's sort of approach to ethics is not uncommon in this business. And you may encounter it. Okay. All right. I'm way over time. My apologies to you, but I hope you found this informative as well as interesting. All right. So for this week, one chapter each in the book, and then watch. I think you're going to find it engaging. Watch the part 1 of Century of the Self, The Happiness Machine, which she'll talk about the American father of public relations, Edward Bernays. All right, everybody. Keep working on those PR presentations. If you have any questions for me, I'm in my office this week. And otherwise, I will see you on Canvas. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.